Hey guys, welcome back to Soul Speak Visions. Brian here. Today I would like to speak on the topic of what it means to lose your soul, or rather to, for a period of time, temporarily misplace your soul. The implications involved, how it really occurs, how you lose your soul, what really happens, what's going on inside of you, and also the rebirth, rebuilding process. The process of renewing your soul. And this is different for everybody, but I will be speaking on personal experience and how I most definitely for a few years lost my soul. Or rather, as I said before, temporarily misplaced my soul. This happened to me without my awareness intact. I was sort of thrown into this unknowingly, and needless to say, this created a lot of negative things in my life by way of negative emotions, by way of experiencing anxiety and panic attacks, having depression issues, having problems with sleeping and eating and simply taking care of myself, and how I unknowingly made things so much worse for myself by giving in to these shadows and this negativity. And therefore, I think that in a sense, it falls on me that I lost my soul. But in the same way, it also comes back on me that I was able to rebuild my soul and to resurface as a creative spirit full of light and full of love and wanting to contribute to the world in any which way that I possibly could. First off, I want to say that if you're in a place where you've temporarily misplaced your soul, or you truly feel like you've lost contact with your spiritual sense, I want you to know that that is not by mistake, nor is it by design. That is simply where you are. That is simply where your path, your journey has led you. And there's a fundamental reason why what is occurring in your life. And I know that I didn't see it until far later on. But speaking truthfully, I think without that severe decline, without temporarily misplacing my soul, I wouldn't have been able to bounce back as strongly as I did and to convert all of that negative, dark energy into creativity, into light, into wanting to make a difference in the world and living out my dreams, and thereby connecting with my inner nature and growing as a soul, as a spirit, as a creative being, as a human being. So if you're there, if all hope seems lost, if you don't feel like you are connecting with your soul, even if you feel like you never have, I want you to know that all hope is not lost. And the truth is that at any given time there will be an opportunity, and it starts in the moment by being proactive and by simply looking at yourself in the mirror and by tuning out the mind and simply listening, being present, being there, being all-encompassing of everything that your soul has to tell you and everything that your spirit will instruct you and guide you along the way, because regardless of, you know, the pain and the darkness, lightness can be found within any given moment. Within the shroud of darkness, therein lies a single beam of light. And through that light, we can conduct ourselves in a way that can transform the darkest soul into the brightest light-bearing spiritual person around. And without the dark, I don't think we would be able to embrace the light as fully as you can when you've experienced all facets and all levels of the Spirit, both light and dark. So if you're out there struggling, I want you to know there's hope for you. And I hope that by telling my story, I can possibly offer some inspiration or encouragement. Every path is different, and we all grow in different ways. None of us stay the same. We're always growing. It's not a competition. It never has been. What works for me may not work for you. The different ways that I was able to reclaim my life after losing my soul for a few years. But no matter which way works, it works for you, and that's your way. And that's beautiful, and that's everything it could ever be. And through that, I think potential is ultimately realized in one's life and in one's growing and living through life. And we're never a finished product, and we're always going to have setbacks and shortcomings. And through this, we grow. Through the times of trouble and the trials and tribulations of life and the low periods, that is energy. Even though it might be dark energy, that energy is still very powerful, as you probably know. And you, as a creative being, have the power and can transform that energy into something self-sufficient and supportive and life-altering by way of spiritual creation, by way of connecting with your true nature and letting your dreams be discovered through that experience. When speaking my own personal story, it's rather difficult, and I've been kind of going back and forth over how I wanted to explain this and create this video, because there's multiple layers and elements to this story. But speaking purely on the part of the story that overlays everything, the mental illness, the problems with, being too involved with certain things and being dependent, and on the other side, alienating myself through a purely spiritual sense. I have no doubt that I lost my soul for a few years. And up until that point, I think this had already been occurring. But I turned a blind eye, and I put on sort of a front, a facade, for the sake of molding myself and conforming to the reality around me, because that's all I knew how to do. I'm talking like 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I didn't know anything better. By then I had already figured out that I was a spiritual being. I had been creative for years, but that wasn't enough, and I shut up that spiritual part, and I put it aside to just live and be with friends and be part of activities that ultimately did not serve my soul. The part of the story that gets a little scary and features the severe decline is the part of the story where I start peeling back the layers of my soul unknowingly, and a little thing called anxiety appears, and a little thing called having visions that appears, And it's scary, and it's not fun. Things like panic attacks, it connected me to this life force, this alternate life force that proved to be rather difficult to overcome, because, to be honest, there was no reason to want to overcome this, because I was dealing with my shadow. I was dealing with myself. This was an ill-fated attempt, a futile attempt at overcoming my own shadow, of not facing my true self, as identified by the soul, the creative force within me. I was living out an existence that wasn't paying respect to my internal spirit and my soul. And because of this, I feel that for a few years my soul was basically hurled at me and thrown like a fastball. And instead of gradually learning about myself and having meaningful experiences to uncover the fabric of my spiritual self, instead I was thrown into this fear-stricken reality. This reality that created feelings of derealization and anxiety, and simply not knowing, not being aware. And this reality was not fun. This reality caused me to stay in situations that I didn't want to be in, that no longer served my soul. This reality made it possible for me to develop dependencies and to put up a wall between who I truly was and who I wanted to be, or who I was acting as a facade, as a front. I can assure you this wasn't pleasant, this wasn't fun in any way, but I was still living, I was still breathing, and I was there, and I was experiencing this. And no, not every moment was terrible. I had a lot of good times and laughs, but ultimately that period of my life, in my memory, I characterize it as a period of not being in direct contact with the lightness of my soul, but rather embracing darkness and, I would even say getting a little possessed by certain dark entities and spirits. I'm not afraid to say that. That's how I interpret the situation from a spiritual standpoint. Now, there was a lot of underlying mental illness and issues that were there that were happening concurrently with the spiritual stuff. But to me, it's all one thing. And all I know is that those were several of the worst years of my life, and I was never sure about myself. And I was acting out in ways that were not me. I was not Brian. I don't know who that guy was. And now, looking back, I can say that those, while they were the worst years of my life, in a way they were also the best. Now let me explain. Through those periods of my life, I learned a lot about myself, and I grounded myself into a spiritual nature that was not full of light. But regardless, I still experienced a deepened sense of reality. And I experienced a reality that taught me that I didn't want to be the way that I was, that I didn't want to stay on that path. So, looking in the reflection mirror, it's like, Brian, okay, what are you doing, man? Things have gotten this bad. How can they get better? What are you going to do to change? What are you going to do? What are you going to stop doing? Is this really the way that you want things to unfold? How much more can you take? And I remember sitting up at night asking myself these questions. And by then I knew that some of what was happening was due to my own fault and not listening to my soul. But a lot of things felt outside of myself, and I sort of felt that I was a victim of circumstance, and I put up these defense mechanisms, and I fell into that whole victim mentality, and I don't think that mentality, that attitude really serves you at all, other than, casting off blame onto the nature of reality, which is unpredictable and unstoppable and always present, good and bad. It was my decision to change. It was my decision to clean up my act. It was my decision to listen to my soul and not speak, to tune out the mind's distractions and pinpoint what part of me really wanted to change and in what ways could I change. I'm happy to say that this period of my life ended about a year ago. About a year ago, 11 months ago, I had my breaking point. And I'll talk more about the mental illness part probably in an upcoming video, because that's a whole different perspective of looking at this. But spiritually, I got to a breaking point where I no longer knew who I was. Anything could have happened. I really thought that I wouldn't make it. I was so scared of just being here. It wasn't for me. And that was a scary time. I'm happy to say that 11 months ago I made a change. And it was gradual and not all at once. It started by running, becoming healthier, becoming active, cutting out certain things, eventually becoming sober, and eventually becoming a vegetarian, because that's something that works for me, becoming more health conscious, reading books that are inspiring, listening to my creative side, and being willing to change my perspective for the sake of creation and for the sake of living out my soul's true intention. I in a sense, I surrendered. I surrendered. I said, okay, there is no control. There is no weathering this storm. So I'm just going to simply move with the waves. I'm going to be proactive and surrender to this change. And slowly but surely things started to get better. And no longer was I caught in this fear-stricken reality, this bubble of madness and not knowing and complete hopelessness and sadness and anxiety-ridden existence. I was free. This isn't to say that every day is perfect. This isn't to say that I still don't have anxiety problems, because I do. I'm dealing with anxiety. That's an everyday thing. There's still depression sometimes. One thing I will say is things have gotten so much better since I made the conscious choice to reclaim my life and to clean up my act and to revisit the parts of my soul that I had long left behind. And I'm happy to say that I'm generally happier and living a more productive, proactive existence. And I'm more creative than ever. I'm more clear-minded than ever. And it would be a far stretch to say, but I truly believe that I will never revert back to the person that I was, the soulless individual that became enthralled in darkness. And I know that I now have a voice, that I am Brian, and that I stand for something. And I know who I am. And while my soul is always changing, while my spirit is always evolving and changing, sometimes losing, sometimes putting forth and gaining, it's a process of give and take. Because there's no perfect reality, only the reality that you create for yourself. And in my experience, that reality is far more possible when you are on good terms with your soul and when you are good to yourself. So I challenge you, if you're in a tight spot, if you're in a dark place, if things just seem to be going terribly wrong, to open your heart and open your soul and surrender to your spirit and simply listen and be present, be here, be where your soul is, be in that place, and to pinpoint things you need to change. Whichever way, different things work for different people. Do what it takes to live out your true potential. Shed a new skin and enlighten yourself by the possibility of new, remarkable existence, living out your own dreams and destinies that, maybe down the line you wrote off as, just a dream that would never come to fruition. I want you to know anything is possible, and that change is more than possible, and that I believe in you. And I hope to make a video soon in regard to mental illness and things of that nature, and how that had a lot to do with my story. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and thank you. Peace, my friends.